Alright, so I have a lot of thoughts about The Last Jedi. I know everyone does. So I just wanted to make this video to kind of get my thoughts out there about the movie. So just a warning, this is going to be a spoiler review of The Last Jedi, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want anything ruined, probably just turn this off. So my thoughts are going to be coming from my place as a Star Wars fan, growing up as a Star Wars fan, and as a screenwriter. So I'll start off with the things I liked about the movie. I really liked that this film tried to tell its own story. My biggest problem with The Force Awakens was that it was very similar to A New Hope. I know a lot of people felt the same way, and this film definitely does its own thing, which, even if I don't agree with the direction it went, I can appreciate that it tried to do its own thing. The visuals in this movie are very stunning. Rian Johnson is a very visual director. This is probably the best looking Star Wars movie that exists so far. And the fight scene between with Kylo and Rey fighting side by side is very fun. That was hands down my favorite scene in the movie. I still think I like the fight at the end of Force Awakens better, but that scene is a lot of fun. Kylo Ren continues to be my favorite part of this new Star Wars trilogy. Everything with him in it, every scene with him in it, I loved. Adam Driver is a fantastic actor. I love his character and the direction his character goes in this movie. I really loved Rey and Kylo's kind of relationship that they started to build during this movie, and dare I say, a romantic relationship. I hope so. I kind of I wanted to go that direction, and if it did, I would be totally on board. They're kind of hinting at it, so maybe in the next movie, that's where we'll go. We'll see. Um, I really liked the opening fight sequence. I really liked Paige, that Asian fighter who was able to set the bomb off. I don't know why. That scene got to me. I really liked it. There's no real reason for it, but I enjoyed it. Um, so those are my favorite parts of the movie. So I guess we'll move on to the parts that I have issues with, which is most of it. So basically, the entire resistance subplot of the movie I didn't like, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'll go into. I've mentioned that Rian Johnson is a really good visual director. His cinematography is amazing, but he's not the best writer, and he wrote and directed this movie. And the writing is where I have most of my problems with this film. So the plot for the Resistance, I'll sum it up. They're running away from the First Order in space, and their ships are being picked off one by one, and they're running out of gas. And that's the Resistance is basically going to be destroyed and ended in this movie. Basically in one spot for the whole movie, and it kind of gets old after a while. I wanted them to create something better. This whole situation feels like they were just like, oh, what can we do with the Resistance? Oh, what if they were being picked off in space and running out of gas? And I don't know. At the beginning of the movie, it starts off with them running away from the First Order, and at the end of the movie, they're still running away from the First Order. There's no real change in their situation during this movie, and it's not the best storytelling. It's kind of boring. So Poe Dameron was one of my favorite characters in The Force Awakens, and he kind of didn't do a lot, and I was kind of really excited to see what he would do in this movie because I really wanted more of him. He does get more characterization, but I didn't really. I mean, it could have been done better. So he's kind of portrayed as this hothead character who he kind of makes these rash decisions, doesn't like taking orders, and gets a lot of people hurt because of that. It's a character that we've seen in other films, but there are some problems with the way they have his arc in this movie. So Leia gets put in a coma, and Purple Hair Lady takes over. And Poe doesn't like what the way Purple Hair Lady is leading. He asks her what her plan is to get them out of this situation, and she doesn't tell him. And so what does Poe decide to do? He decides to do a mutiny, which is totally unnecessary because if the lady had just told him what her plan was, then none of that would have had to happen. But instead, to create drama or whatever the reason was, there's no real reason for her character not to tell him um, we have this mutiny. And eventually, Poe learns that she has a plan, which is to evacuate them to this planet, and he learns to respect her because she sacrifices herself to save them. And somehow, I guess, learns his lesson that he shouldn't be a hothead, which I didn't really get that. I thought that his arc could have been a lot more powerful. I think the J.J. Abrams 2009 Star Trek movie is a really good example of the same kind of character, Kirk, who is a hothead. He doesn't like taking orders. He gets people hurt, and in that movie, he loses everything that he has. His actions cause him to lose everything. His crew maroons him on this planet, and he has to learn his lesson and eventually get back to his crew to help them. And it's a much more powerful way of learning that lesson than we see in this movie. For the same kind of character. So I guess we talk about Luke Skywalker. His is the other big plot of this movie, and I know a lot of people had issues with the way his character is portrayed. I did as well, but probably for different reasons. Uh, Luke's character in this movie, he feels bad about what he did to Kylo Ren, so he kind of moves to this island where he's alone, exiles himself, and believes the Jedi are over, and he's kind of waiting to die. Which I can totally get on board with all that. I was glad we did get to finally learn a little bit more about him and Kylo and their relationship. Kylo reveals to Rey that Luke tried to kill him, and that's why he freaked out and ran away and joined the dark side, which I thought was really cool. That was a really cool twist, and I thought it was really bold. And I thought Luke trying to kill Kylo would create a really interesting situation for Luke's character, where he then has to redeem himself and kind of um, fix things with Kylo for creating Kylo and sending him to the dark side. I thought it would have been really cool. And that's still kind of what happens, but it's not as interesting because eventually Luke comes to Rey and he tells his side of the story. And he reveals that he had thought about killing Kylo, but he didn't actually try to kill Kylo, which kind of is a backtrack on the writer's part and makes it not as interesting to me. If they had just gone for it and been like, yeah, Luke tried to kill Kylo, and I think a lot of people would have liked it more actually if they had done it right. I think that would have been way more interesting because then it's more of a redemptive, interesting story for Luke. I also wanted more of Kylo and Luke's past and kind of their relationship and what made Kylo turn the dark side. Like, what did Snoke do to seduce him? And I think that getting that history would have made their final confrontation a lot more meaningful because right now we've seen one scene with them together and there's no words in the scene. So speaking of the confrontation, we might as well talk about it. It's the confrontation where Luke kind of reveals himself, uses the Force to make himself a hologram to confront Kylo, to stall, to allow the Resistance to get out. There wasn't really any reconciliation between Kylo and Luke, um, which I mean there doesn't have to be. I think they kind of set it up for there to be something, um, but then Luke dies, so I guess we'll never get that. Luke projecting himself as a hologram, I think it could have worked really well, and I actually thought that was really cool. But I think I would have enjoyed it and appreciated it a lot more if the rest of the movie had been better, kind of building up to this final moment. Right now, all I can think is that this wasn't really the end I wanted for this character, which that's just my opinion. Everyone else is going to have their own opinion about this. Right now, he kind of goes out saving this rebellion that he didn't really care about because they just ran out of gas and there's a lot of weak characterization going on. Force hologram I do like and I think it's really cool. But would it kill him? I don't think it has to. I think his death is kind of unnecessary here. I actually have a theory about Luke Skywalker's death. So Mark Hamill has been pretty vocal about not liking the way that the series has taken his character and not liking the way Disney is going with the Star Wars trilogy in general. And I've watched some interviews about him, and for episode 9, there was a director attached, Colin Trevorrow, who got fired over creative differences. And him and Mark Hamill were having discussions about where to take his character in episode 9 before he got fired. And so somewhere in all that, I think Disney decided that they didn't like the way they got to work with Mark for this movie, and they decided that, you know what, we're just not going to want to deal with this guy anymore. We're just going to kill him in this movie. Which, whatever. But obviously, we're never gonna, that's my theory. We're never going to be able to confirm that, probably. So, question. I have only seen it once, but I don't remember them saying, I've got a bad feeling about this in the movie. Which, if they didn't, is perhaps the biggest travesty of all. I hope it's in there. I probably just missed it. So I want to take a little bit and talk about the tone of the movie. There's an odd sense of humor that is in these new Star Wars movies that doesn't really, it changes everything from the old Star Wars movies. There's a lot of serious moments where they start off as serious scenes, and then they'll throw in a big joke that changes the whole scene into a joke. And this is something that Marvel does a lot in their movies, especially if you've seen Thor Ragnarok. They do it, like almost every scene of that movie is played for a joke. And the original Star Wars movies, they don't do this. These movies, I mean, there is moments of humor. The droids are there for comedic relief. Han always has snarky comments, but there aren't scenes that are totally devoted to humor, at least not many of them. And there's a lot of scenes like that in these movies. One of the biggest scenes that I kind of caught this in is the scene where Rey hands Luke his lightsaber, and then he just tosses it over his shoulder, which, it's so ridiculous that you can't help but laugh at it, but it totally takes you out of the moment, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what is happening here? And it's not really Star Wars, at least in the tone that we're used to seeing it. And this happens in The Force Awakens as well. There's a lot more jokes than we're used to, but I didn't mind it as much in that movie. In this movie, it's much more noticeable. Another scene that this happens in is towards the beginning, when Poe is talking with General Hux, and he's pretending like he can't hear him, like they're on the phone. He's like, whoa, holding for General Hux. Like, are you there? General Hux. What? So Rogue One, it's not my favorite Star Wars film. I have a lot of problems with it, but I think that's the closest of the new Star Wars movies that gets closest to the tone of the old Star Wars movies. And so I definitely appreciated that. Hope we see more movies like that, tone-wise. Benicio del Toro's character, that weird stuttering guy who kind of took Finn and Rose off in his ship, what the heck? That's all I have to say about that guy. Speaking of wasted characters, Captain Phasma, they did nothing with her in this movie. She basically is there to die, to confront Finn and then die. They set her up, I mean, they have toys of her, and they set her up to be this really cool, menacing character. And what happens is she's basically going to go down as like this Boba Fett-like character, where she's in a few scenes, but she doesn't actually do anything in the movies, which even at least Boba Fett had some cool stuff to do. They talk a lot about the end of the Jedi, and how it's time for the Jedi to end, especially Luke. That's his whole character. He's like, the Jedi have to end. And then Kylo also kind of reiterates this when he's like, Rey, we need to do our own thing. Help me rule. I mean, the Jedi and Sith, that's a thing of the past. And that's a big theme of this movie, is that the Jedi are over. At the end of the movie, Luke and Kylo are fighting, and Luke's like, I will not be the last Jedi. And they hint that Rey is going to be a Jedi. And then they show that Rey actually has the Jedi textbooks that she took from Luke, which kind of backtracks on this whole the Jedi have to end idea. So they bring up this issue, but they never really finalize if the Jedi have to end or not. I mean, they kind of hint that there will be more Jedi and Rey's going to be a Jedi, but we never get to hear what Rey has to say about this. So, I mean, it's not the biggest problem with the movie. It would have been nice to get at least one word of resolution about whether or not the Jedi will be ending, but I guess we'll have to wait to the next film to find out. So what exactly did Luke teach Rey? I was able to come up with 3 things. 1, he sat her down and taught her more about the Force and how it works. He told her more about him and Kylo's past, which I have already expressed my issues over. I wanted more of that. And he told her that it's time for the Jedi to end, which, if I'm understanding the message of the film correctly, they kind of went back on this anyways, and the Jedi are still going to be a thing. So he really didn't teach her that much, which makes the 2 main plots of the movie, where almost nothing of significance to the trilogy happens that will affect the next movie. The underground mirror scene I thought looked really cool, but there's kind of no reason for that to be there. In fact, that leads me to another one of my issues with the film, which is that Rey, they kind of set Rey up to have this attraction towards the dark side. When Luke is teaching Rey about the Force, she's kind of drawn to this dark pit, and Luke's like, "Oh my gosh, you went right for the dark. You didn't even try to stop it." And then like Rey is shown in the fight sequence with her and Kylo, she's just angry and filled with rage. And she has this flirtatious relationship with Kylo, like she's going to be turned to the dark side. And Kylo Ren even tells her, "I've seen you. You helped me. You turned to the dark side." And that doesn't happen during this movie. And I was kind of disappointed by that. I personally would have loved to see Rey turn the dark side. I think that would have been a really bold decision. I think it would have been really interesting. As a writer, I was like, here's what I wanted. I was thinking could happen. If Rey turns to the dark side when Kylo's like, "Help me," she helps him because she finds out who her parents are. Nobody. That makes her angry. She goes, helps Kylo. At the end of the movie, they're both on the dark side. That is a cliffhanger that leads to the next one. Rey does some really dark stuff that even surprises Kylo at the beginning of episode 9, and Kylo's like, "Whoa, what the heck's going on?" That prompts him to actually turn to the light, because we know eventually it's going to happen. We're probably not going to see Rey turn to the dark side, I guess, even though they kind of set that up. Why is that in there? I don't know. We'll see where they go with that in the next one. So, kind of going back to this idea of wasted characters, we have Snoke, which I know I'm not the only one who was frustrated with the way they handled his character. We knew almost nothing about him going into this movie, and we still know almost nothing about him, and now he's dead. So I was let down by his character. I wanted them to showcase, like, make us afraid of this guy, showcase how powerful he is, and they kind of did that a little bit, but I wasn't afraid of him like I was afraid of the Emperor. I wanted to know more about him, like how and why did he seduce Kylo Ren? How old is he? How did he rise to power? How did he learn to use the Force? His character in this film was also inconsistent. At the beginning, he's like, "Kylo, you messed up. Get out of here. Like, you're a disappointment." Basically kicks him out. And at the end, when Kylo brings him Rey, he's like, "Kylo, old buddy, like, thanks for doing this. We're going to be ruling together, buddy." And I was like, this makes no sense. This guy just was totally saying the opposite thing like 5 minutes ago. I did like Kylo's betrayal of Snoke. I thought that was a really cool moment. It was really caught me off guard. I think it would have been a lot more powerful if they had taken the time to build up Kylo and Snoke's relationship, especially showing Snoke's abuse of Kylo, which would have given Kylo more of a reason to kill Snoke and turn on him. So Rey's parents, when we first found out that they were no one, I was like, okay, like I guess I can appreciate that. I can that fits in with the theme they're trying to make of everyone can use the Force, whatever. But the more I thought about it, the more I didn't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because this 9 episode Skywalker saga is about the Skywalker family. The first trilogy is about Anakin, the second trilogy is about Luke and Leia, and this one is about Kylo, and I was hoping Rey would also be some kind of Skywalker. I was hoping she'd be Luke's daughter, but I guess that's not the case. And if that's not the case, it's really interesting that they would choose a non-Skywalker to make as the main character of this new trilogy. I don't really like that decision. Maybe in the next one we'll find out that that was actually wrong, that she is a Skywalker. That's weird. Finn and Rose. I didn't mind Rose at times. I think she could have used a little more character development. The way it is right now, she kind of helps Finn to kind of get over his cowardness, which that's his whole thing. He kind of runs away. I think it would have been interesting if she also had, like, her sister was a fighter, dies in this battle. Rose doesn't really seem like she knows how to fight that well, so maybe Finn could have helped her learn how to fight, and then they kind of help each other, which would have made their relationship a little more fun to watch. Finn, right now, I think has one of the best arcs in the film. He starts off as this character, that's his whole thing, is he just keeps running away from the battle. Rose catches him, and at the end of the film, he is, when they're riding out on the salt speeders, he's the one who's riding towards the giant gun to sacrifice himself to save everyone. See his change there. I thought when he was riding out during that in that giant beam, I thought he was gonna do it. I was like, this guy is a hero. He's gonna kill himself for everyone. But then at the last second, Rose swoops in, saves him, which I have big issues with that move. It doesn't make sense for Rose's character because she almost turned Finn for running away from this rebellion that she really wants. As her whole character, she wants to fight the Empire, and the one chance they have to stop the Empire from destroying them, she ruins by saving Finn. Because at this point, they don't know that Luke is going to save them. So she basically kills everyone in the rebellion by doing this because she has a little crush. Honestly, this moment would have been a lot more impactful and powerful if they had just killed Finn and let him save them, but they didn't do that. The Salt Gliders do nothing. You think about it, they get on those Salt Gliders, they ride out, and then they retreat. In my mind, I'm instantly like, okay, Disney wanted a new ship to sell toys of, so they make this thing that they glide out on and does nothing. You know that's why. You know that's why. So that makes three plots in the movie that are totally unnecessary. You have Finn and Rose's sojourn to that casino planet to get the code breaker, which ultimately they don't need. Totally unnecessary. You have his mutiny, which could have totally been avoided if the purple hair lady just told them about her plan. And you have the Salt Glider final stand, which the Salt Gliders do nothing and they just retreat. So the last thing I'll say about the film is that I want to talk about those gold dice that Luke gave to Leia. I was really confused by this moment. I was like, whoa, did I miss something in the movie? And I think a lot of people felt the same way. So I did some research into this, and apparently those are the dice that Han Solo uses to win the Millennium Falcon from Lando, which 100% we will see in the Han Solo movie coming out next year. I don't know why they included that in this movie. It's sort of like an Easter egg for a movie that hasn't happened yet. But it's very obvious, like, they make it very obvious, like, he is handing her these dice, like it's something significant, but it has no meaning to us because we haven't seen that movie yet. I don't know why they didn't just wait until episode 9 to have that moment, but whatever. So I love the Kylo Ren stuff and Rey. I hope they do something, some cool stuff with that in the next one. J.J. Abrams, if anyone can save it, it's him. Hope you enjoyed the review. I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to think about the movie. Comment below.